Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for sticking around. I'm Elizabeth Nearing. I'm the literary manager here, and I am so excited to have James Sampliner, the fantastic music director of the show you just saw, and he also played it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you.
This is so fun. We sometimes do talkbacks without the microphones and lights, so it's very exciting for us.
Yes.
So James, would you? I almost called you Jason.
No, that's somebody else.
That's a different. I know there's a lot of J names between
there are a lot.
in this
Yes.
show. We've got Jamie, Jason, and James.
That's correct.
And multiples. So, could you tell us a little bit about your background with both music direction and also particularly with Jason Robert Brown's work?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I hadn't planned on doing theater as a career. I just was a musician. I was a percussionist, actually, at Indiana University. And I thought I was going to be doing timpani at some orchestra somewhere in the country, and hopefully eventually ending up at the Met, which is what I really wanted to do when I was a kid, was play timpani in the Met Orchestra for the opera. That changed when people were telling me, yeah, but first you got to do this, and you got to stay in Columbus for a couple of years, and then you got to do... I just wanted to come home to New York. So I came back and played piano and did some cruise ship work for a while, and that's when I got the bug to be a music director. Was out there on the ships and started doing it there, and then I became the music director of the Williamstown Theater Festival in Williamstown, Mass. And I was there for 8 years with Michael Ritchie, who is now at Center Theater Group in Los Angeles. And we and a whole bunch of people, including the guy who did the lights, Ben Stanton, we all kind of came up together. A whole group, the whole level of us came up together. Great young directors, great young actors, musicians, just a whole bunch of us came up at the same time in Williamstown together. And because of that, we started to network within each other and see kind of the talents that each other one had. So we were able to kind of help each other along the ladder. And through that, I worked with Michael Greif, who is the director of Rent, as well as Next to Normal, and the new If Then, which is on the Broadway. And getting a friendship with him allowed me to then go straight into New York theater without basically having to go on tour or do regional work or anything like that, which is the way that most music directors have to come up. You start basically by assisting other music directors and then possibly getting a tour of something that has been successful in New York, and you go out for a couple of years and you make some money and you come back and you hopefully will get a job. Well, that wasn't true for me. What worked for me was nepotism, because my sister is the company manager of a tiny Broadway show. It's called Wicked, I think. So that kind of helped. And believe me, she's been my number one supporter. She's much older than I am, and so she was basically taking care of me when I was a baby. So she's been my number one support from the very get-go, and she always had wanted the best for me. And she said one day when I was trying to figure out what to do with my career, she's like, you should really go into theater because, well, I can help you, and B, you would actually make money, like an actual check, as opposed to beans in a can and a MetroCard, you know. And I thought about that for a while. I was like, I like food. I like that. And I like...
Not just beans.
Right, and I like living in Manhattan, and I thought that that was a kind of good way to make a living, was to go into the theater, and which is what launched Williamstown. And so from her help and working with people like Michael Greif and Jerry Mitchell early on in my career, it basically launched me into the theatrical world straight away. Now, Jason and I are literally 15 days apart. Like, we're the same age, same sign, same everything. We're 15 days apart. He had his meteoric rise to stardom very early on. I was still out doing ships when it all began. So I wasn't really all that familiar with the actual rise of his work until I got back and started working in the theater. And I thought, well, there's a composer that I could really relate to, because he plays music the way I play. He writes music the way I think about music. In other words, all styles. It's not just one genre. He really loves everything. He loves everything from classical music, you know, Ravel and Strauss, to klezmer, to rock and roll, to funk and jazz, and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, there's somebody that speaks to me, but we had never met. Fast forward to about a year and a half ago, and I worked on a one-night-only presentation of his Song Cycle Songs for a New World, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with that in this audience, but if you liked what you heard tonight, you should look up his oeuvre, because there's some lovely, challenging stuff in there. And this first song cycle that he wrote back in '93 was something that I came to late, and I did a one-night presentation of it, and I found myself going, yeah, I really like this guy. And so we started talking, and one day the phone rang, and Jason was on the other end, and he said, do you have any plans? I said, when? He said, summer, fall, last year. And I said, no. And he's like, I want you to do Honeymoon in Vegas, which is his next Broadway offering, which hopefully will be coming to a theater near you next year, we're hoping. And so I did it at Paper Mill in New Jersey, and that's when we started working together. And it was because of that working relationship that now we're not only just good friends, but he actually, when Gordon called him and said, who do you want to come in, he recommended me straight away, which was really kind. So that's kind of how we started together, Now we're inseparable, so it's kind of fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the many genres that Jason writes from, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more specifically in this particular show, sort of where the music is coming from.
It's interesting. Certain musicals, you have a certain style of music per character. Some writers, when they go to the blank page, they think about the character and who they are, and they develop like a musical language for them. It's mostly seen in opera. We do it a little bit in musicals, but you see it a lot in opera where a composer, once a person comes on stage, there are either motifs or some kind of musical language that comes back and forth. And I think that in this piece, what's really cool is that Jason's taking the emotional moment and writing for that, as opposed to just writing a specific style per character, because with only two people, that gets kind of same. And you wouldn't get kind of a myriad of musical styles through the show to keep you guys kind of interested or tapping your feet or crying or whatever. In this show, what I love so much is that it starts with this kind of, dirgy, plaintive thing. It goes to a Latin thing, which then goes to an American folk pop thing, which then goes to a crazy rock and roll thing, which then goes to, what's the part of that? I don't know, that's kind of like a pop thing. And then the klezmer thing. And inside the klezmer thing is the Strauss thing, the Ravel thing. So you see what I'm saying? There are so many ways to get emotion into the story that I think one of Jason's gifts is his ability to take various styles, merge them together, and still make the character's viewpoint come through to the audience so that you are emotionally connected to what is happening on the stage. Is anybody familiar with pastiche and what pastiche is? Anybody not familiar with pastiche?
Could you give us a brush up anyway?
Yeah. Pastiche is something like, it's basically paying tribute to something, right? It's basically like paying honor to something that's come before. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example in this show. In this show, like Summer in Ohio is like the old kind of swingy, two-beat, Tin Pan Alley kind of thing. But within that, what makes his music so unique, and what I love playing, why I love playing it so much, is because he's able to put his thumbprint on it without, so you think, oh yeah, I've heard that before, and then midway through the song you're like, wait a minute, something's different. Something's not what I expected it to be. Something's changed. Something's different, And I love that about the way that he writes, so that his own thumbprint, even if it's pastiche, even if it's something paying tribute to other types of music, it's still got his thumbprint on it, and it makes it his. And so rarely do you find that. If you guys go see Hello Dolly, you know instantly what that Jerry Herman sound is, right? It's like a gimme. Or if you go see Little Night Music and you hear that Sondheim sound, you know exactly what that is because it's got a certain kind of thumbprint. Well, a lot of young composers have taken those models and tried to write like them instead of being themselves. Whereas Jason's trying to pay honor and homage to the past and still putting his own thumbprint on it. And that's such a hard thing to do as a musical theater writer and still be within the genre, being popular in the genre.
How would you characterize his thumbprint?
That's a good question. It gets a little technical. But what I would say is that he has a certain way of dealing with chords and what we call voice leading. In other words, the way the chords or melodies move, how they move and how they relate to each other. So there's a way that he does things in the musical language that only he does. Inversions of chords, meaning how they're stacked on the piano or in the orchestra, or even the kind of orchestration, the kind of instruments that he uses. This is a very unique group in that there are 2 cellos and a violin. Now, usually when you have a trio, it's usually a violin, a viola, and a cello. But here he wanted the 2 cellos because the cellos really draw out the emotion much better than a viola does, because you've got the very intense lows and then you've got those beautiful high singy notes too. So those are kind of some of the ways that he leaves his thumbprint on things. And it's really, if you dig into it, like in Summer in Ohio, it's like going along and it's bouncy. And then did you notice when she gets to the bookstore, the whole kind of tone of it changed a little bit? Just a little bit. That's his thumbprint.
Yeah, there's that line where she says, "Richard, who was with me," gets uncharacteristically quiet, and there's a little bit of a sort of rhythmic change as well.
That's correct.
In addition to he messes with rhythm in very cool ways. I'm curious. So this piece was written about 15 years ago, now, almost a little less than 15 years ago now, and I'm curious if you have any insight on sort of where his music has gone from then.
From
2002 when this was written
to now.
To now.
Oh,
how he's grown as a composer.
Oh God. I think that Jason has gotten sharper as time goes on. His focus has definitely sharpened. Did anybody get a chance to see Bridges of Madison County in New York City? Yeah.
A few.
Yeah. It's there's a definite maturity now that has come from the life experience of this show, of Parade, and the various ways of seeing young writers and young actors who have been influenced by all this work. So he's definitely gone back to the drawing board in terms of sharpening his skills as a writer. And for me, Bridges and Honeymoon in Vegas, the next one, couldn't be more polar opposite. I mean, Honeymoon in Vegas is a romp. If you guys have seen, did anybody see the movie of Honeymoon in Vegas? Yeah, a couple. If you've seen like The Freshman, Blazing Saddles, the original In-Laws with Alan Arkin, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, the guy that wrote those movies, Andy Bergman, is the guy that wrote the book for Honeymoon in Vegas. So it's a romp, it's a comic romp, and completely a 180 from Bridges, which is such a beautifully kind of melodic and harmonically rich tapestry of music. Honeymoon is like one big pastiche thing. We go to Hawaii, we go to Vegas, we go to New York. There's all sorts of things where Jason's able to kind of like dive into the comedy area of what he does well, which you can hear in songs like Summer in Ohio.
Sure.
Even in I Can Do Better Than That, where the comedy is really rich, even Chicks a Goddess, he gets to really let that fly in Honeymoon.
Sure.
Whereas in Bridges, it's just so lush. I hope you guys get a chance to really download his stuff, because he's a composer of a lot of depth. And his work isn't classifiable in one genre. He's a storyteller. And for all of us, I mean, that's why we do this. We love to tell stories. I don't love to just play music. I love to tell stories through the music. And so in that way, I think the relationship between him and I has been really good because of that, because we just want to tell the best story we can through the music. Yeah.
Absolutely, and there's such a variety of stories, and this is in many ways sort of the most intimate piece, the smallest and the most careful. And within that, there are a lot of little musical tricks and treasures that we sort of discovered in rehearsal. And we were lucky to have James with us through the whole process from day one, and sort of picking out some of those little repeated sections and chord structures and nuggets throughout the piece. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that journey and the things we discovered along the way.
One of the great things about the score is that because of the way that the thing is structured, and one's going backwards and one's going forwards, there's great musical fodder there. There's great musical things to do. And even the very beginning of the piece, when I'm playing alone, that waltz, you're like, oh, that's cute, and you're getting ready and you're sitting down. But in your head, subconsciously, we're giving you the fodder for their wedding waltz. That's the first time it comes back, is when they dance in the wedding. The next time it comes back is when Jamie is about to leave. So these are like, the moments where one piece of music in the same structure, basically the same key, can do three different things emotionally. The first one is just a pleasant setup. The second one is the wedding dance where you fall in love with them being in love. And the third one is when he's about to leave. And for me, one of the discoveries that we made too was the lyric you and nothing but you shows up twice. The first time, she's on that pier and she's furious with him because he's going back to New York to be with his buddies and probably to be with his mistress, which she probably knows about by now, let's say. The second time we hear it is when she can't get enough of him. And it's the same melody both times, but the harmonic setting underneath each one is so markedly different. The first time when she's angry, I'm playing these very sharp chords. And then the second time, it's this florid stuff where my orchestra is just playing these beautiful, lush chords because she's so in love. In opera, we call that leitmotifs, based from Wagner, which is very apparent in something like Tristan, or in The Ring especially. The Ring has the three-note leitmotif that's world famous. And when you hear it, you're like, oh, the ring is somewhere. The ring's somewhere. You know it's somewhere because the orchestra is playing it somewhere. That's kind of how this piece works at its best, is that even the leitmotif of da, 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 in the beginning of Still Hurting comes back 3 or 4 times in the piece. Mm-hmm. The one that's really obvious is the one that comes at the end of part of that where we really lay into it. But the one that's not so obvious is when he does If I Didn't Believe in You, which is in the accompaniment underneath it.
Jamie also has sort of a similar repeated phrase where he says, I could be in love with someone like you.
Yeah.
And he does it, and there's such an underscore at that first one at the end of Shiksagadis. There's sort of that build up to it, and it's so very different the second time. Yeah. And it's almost completely naked in a way musically the second time he says it. And there's those sort of brilliant little pieces throughout that are fun to discover.
We love that. I think that was one of those moments, especially there's another story that goes with that, of course, which I know that you're getting to. So I might as well tell you guys the story. There's another song that belonged in that slot in Chicago, which was the very first Out of Town that Daisy Prince directed before they came to New York. It was a song called I Could Be in Love with Someone Like You. That's an apt title. Well, the problem is that it was so on the nose with his ex-wife that there was a little bit of a lawsuit that came back.
It was an almost lawsuit.
It was an almost lawsuit.
Didn't quite happen.
Didn't quite happen. And they got a cease and desist letter about the song. So Daisy turned to Jason and said, we got to come up with another song. So he wrote Shiksagadis in its place. However, if you're curious to know what that song was, go to his solo record, which is Songs, what is it called? Songs and Someone Else's Clothes. Wearing Someone Else's Clothes.
Huh?
Wearing Someone Else's Clothes. And it's on there. It's called I Could Be in Love with Someone Like You. It was the original song in the place of Shiksagadis. It is about his ex-wife, a little bit too much on the head. And I happen to enjoy Shiksagadis a little better. I think it's a different kind of musical feel than what else is in the show. So I like it a little better. But the lyric is, like Elizabeth was saying, that lyric, I could be in love with someone like you, also has that duality. And I love the setup in the bed scene when he, and if I could be, maybe I should be in love with someone like you. He's really thinking about like what he really wants out of his life in terms of his love and what love means to him, and he doesn't know. He's a kid. They're both kids. Yeah. And I think that's what's so amazing about this show is like, I love the polarity, and I love having the discussion about the polarity of these two people because like my parents were here and they've been married 62 years and they were like, we went to dinner and they said, what's really amazing is that it's 5 years. It's just 5 years out of their life. It's not a whole life. It's that mistakes can be made and mistakes can be righted in their own journeys. But in this particular thing, Jay, what did he say in the preface? He said...
he says that it's about two people who thought loving each other was enough and that it wasn't, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't have tried.
It doesn't mean they shouldn't have tried.
Those are a paraphrase of Jason Robert Brown's own words about the piece.
And as an artist, I love that because I think that we're a rare breed of people in that we put so much of ourselves out there for you guys, not just so that you can enjoy it, so that we can enjoy doing it for you. And it's a very kind of naked way to live. You know, we don't get to hide behind an office window or a cubicle. We just kind of leave it on the floor. Like even we were saying backstage, today's performance, the three of us, we just left it all on the floor. Meaning that we just let it all go because it just felt like you guys were such a great audience that we wanted to give you what you came for, you know?
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to have relationships. It's a struggle, and it's something that we all kind of aspire to. So for those of us that are in the business, we relate, and hopefully, even if you're not in the business, we hope that you relate because it's tough out there when you're in the 21st century and trying to make it kind of stick and work. And there's so many pressures from so many places that you're barraged with and assaulted with, and so it's a compelling thing to do night after night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have time to open it up for some questions. Eliza's got a microphone, so if you raise your hand nice and high, she'll come and grab you and give you a mic so that everybody can hear. There's one right in front. Oh, we need. Unfortunately, we need the microphone. Unfortunately, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I don't know whether it was just my problem, but I talked to someone who was here last night. I had a trouble hearing the lyrics. Was it a weak voice, a weak amplification, or too strong music?
I honestly, sitting up at the piano, I can't answer that. I wish I could.
I was sitting right over there, and I loved watching your passion at the piano. Really terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific.
There's a lot of different elements that go into sort of the mix of the sound. They are mic'd, so there is a balance in terms of like different parts and sort of the levels of the sound that happens with mixing. And then there's also where you're sitting and how it all plays. So there are many different factors, and it's a delicate balance that's sort of played live by the people on stage, the people who are playing instruments, and the person mixing the sound. So there's many pieces of the pie.
I just have a question to ask the audience. Was it me? Did other people find it hard?
On the flip side, I would just like to say, I'm completely opposed to that. I thought it was so clear. I caught everything. I mean, it was absolutely flawless to me. I had no problem.
Yeah.
It was very comfortable.
Yes, we've had a differing of opinions, which is fine. But that's the nature. I mean, you guys, the nature of an enclosed space. Not every seat is perfect. The only place that I've ever been where that's true is at the Beatles Love Show, where you literally have speakers on your chair next to your ear. My friend Jonathan Deans did that sound design. He was like, it was years and years of design, and that's the only time I've ever heard it right, ever. It's a live space is, even if they were unmiked, and even if we played even quieter than we did, you would have a problem hearing, because a live space just naturally, if they were facing, in other words, I'll do a quick demo without I'm sorry I'm going to be off mic for a minute, but
It's all right.
let's say I'm here. Can you hear what I'm saying right now? Yes. Now can you hear what I'm saying clearer here? See the difference? Even though you can hear me there, the fact that I'm facing you, but you didn't get as much of the same kind of consonants. Now if I face you and say the same thing, you hear it clearer than when I was over there. It's because of the nature of space. It's a physics thing. You know what I mean? And the sound can only do so much to help with that, and couple that with all the instruments up there. It's a difficult thing to master, and it's never going to be perfect. So it really depends where you're sitting. There might be a little bit of that. There might be a little bit of that.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between the musical director, and the production designer?
Absolutely. Everybody hear the question about relationship? So my relationship with the director is kind of like the actors being together. My relationship with Gordon is that we are trying to come up with a way to make sure that the story is as clear as possible. So from my point of view, the director will have a vision for a scene, and I'll give you a good example in this one so you have an idea. We were dealing with the setup for part of that right after Moving Too Fast. and the strings are kind of bouncing along. And in the score, there is no vamping. In other words, we don't repeat a bar. It just kind of goes straight forward. But Gordon was like, no, we need time to kind of set the mood for the next thing. And we've just come out of moving too fast, and he's been jumping on tables, and there's stuff to do. And so, so my relationship with him is to be able to kind of help him find the vision to get either timings right or mood right. And then in terms of my relationship with the rest of the creative team, it's basically just to provide them with the materials to then do the magic that they do. I don't directly interact with lighting design. I do interact very directly with sound design. But lighting and costumes and scenery I'd have very little to do other than okaying like the platform for the band and making sure that all the specs are right. But my biggest dealing is with the director and with the sound designer. And also with stage management, because they're, basically stage management is running the show. They're the ones that call all the cues. So it's between the stage manager and myself who are actually running the show day after day. Myself from the musical end of stuff, stage manager from the technical end of stuff. So I kind of am also, now in a Broadway setting, it's a different job. In a Broadway setting, I'm also the intermediate between the producers and the cast. So my job there is to basically keep the maintenance of the show alive so that I can make sure that the vocals are being sung the way they were sung opening night. Everything has to be maintained at the level of opening night. That's the gig. When you're doing a Broadway show. In a regional production, it's different, especially in a revival, because it's been done before, so there's a little bit more creative juice in there, but then you're also limited because nothing can really change. So I have to kind of be the score police as well. We can't really add stuff to the score other than vamping measures to make some time.
There's also a pretty significant role in the rehearsal hall in terms of, sitting in the room, the relationship between you and Gordon and the actors in terms of the way things were sung. There was sort of an amazing journey with the audition sequences and sort of talking to Katie about how to make Kathy's audition an audition and not Katie singing. And sort of there was a lot of influence in terms of style and throughout the creative process in terms of acting and how the music can inform the story is really something that I think is an integral part of the process between the music director and the director.
Yeah, and if you had anybody seen this before in New York or any other productions? You had, ma'am? Anybody else had seen it before? You guys had. So one of the things that I wanted to change was the way that she did those auditions. There's something in a technical term called a head voice, a mix, and a belt, and your legit sound. Legit sound is like opera or like old Rodgers and Hammerstein. Think like John Raitt or Katherine Grayson. Mm-hmm. That's legit. Then there's kind of the mixy stuff, which is kind of the in-between. And then there's the belt, which is Ethel Merman, right? So the way that I had envisioned, the first time you hear that When You Come Home to Me song, it says in the score, a la Jerome Kern. Well, I'd never really heard it sung like a Jerome Kern song. And I wanted to hear it sung like a Jerome Kern song, because if somebody came in for an audition for a 20s or 30s style musical, I'd want to hear it in that type of voice, a la Katherine Grayson, right? So Katie and I talked about it, and she was like, oh, that's interesting. And so she started to sing it with a warmer, richer tone, with that legit sound. And I was like, okay, good. Now, when it comes to the bad audition, and the piano player is really messing it up, keep going with it and try to keep up with it no matter what I throw at you. So every night I change that, by the way. So it's different every night for her. So she has no idea what's coming, which is great, and kind of almost too true for real life. And so she keeps that style and tries to keep it going. Now, the third time you hear it, she's doing it, you're hearing her inner monologue, what she's actually thinking about while she's singing. So if you'll notice, she started singing it in that Katherine Grayson thing, but then went into what we call a head voice, which is just plain kind of almost speak singing, so that you can delineate the difference between what's actually going in front of the people she's singing to and what's going on in her head. So that's stuff that we discovered in rehearsal and the kind of relationship that we had, working together.
It's a great question. Thank you. We have time for a couple more if people have, all the way up in the middle. Thanks, Eliza.
Yep. Thank you so much. What a wonderful production. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Vocal health. is a question for me, because I hear these amazing singers, and the range, and the jumping around on tables, and how many shows a week. So what is your relationship in terms of their vocal health? Do they just take that all completely on their own and deal with their own vocal coaches, or how much do you deal with that?
That's a good question. I don't do anything on the maintenance. They do that. They have their own regimens, and Katie and Adam are really, really good about getting rest. We have apartments here that we stay in, so we socialize kind of within ourselves and just keep the volume at a low. Like, we're not out at the bars. Even for me, I have to be on some kind of physical rest too, because my forearms really get a workout in this show.
Well, there's also like in this pure staging, we had long conversations because they never leave the stage, and making sure they're hydrated enough became a serious concern. So there's, cups of water in boxes and planned places, like they have certain, and that was something that was really important throughout the process to say, okay, if I'm going to make it vocally through the show, I need to have water here, here, and here. And it's something that we worked on in the room and started incorporating as early as possible so that it was a part of the rhythm of the show, just like anything else.
So hopefully you guys didn't notice that they were drinking water. Yeah, it's a neat trick. I mean, that's part of so the hydration is definitely important. And Katie drinks like 40 gallons a day, something crazy.
Ridiculous.
I've never seen anybody drink so much water in my life. So she's great. And Adam has a great routine. He does a lot of yoga and stretching and just making sure that he's warm up before the show. So these two, it's a remarkable thing to be able to do this with no understudies and just 8 times a week. Yeah. The other side of it is that it's only an 85-minute show. So the rest between shows on a 2-show day is longer than it would be on a Broadway house. Yeah. But on the flip side, they're singing more than they would in a Broadway show normally. But there's a lot of great discipline that they put in to make sure that they maintain their vocal health.
Absolutely. And it's lucky that it's so short. There's one over here. She's on her way with a microphone.
Coming with the mic.
But that's one of the advantages of having a short show. If you only have 2 people in the show, it's sort of a disservice to have it be a 3-hour show.
Yes.
I enjoyed the whole show. It was great. But the opening songs with Adam, the whole thing was about his dating all the Jewish girls and so on. Well, for me, that was easy to understand and so on. But I'm just wondering how a more general audience handles that. Do they understand? Have you had any problem with people that don't seem to understand what's going on with all that?
I think most people do. Did anybody not understand what the Shiksa Goddess thing was? Let's take a poll. Good. See, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, if you do it in Kansas, it's not necessarily where they're going to get it. It's been done in Kansas, and people get it. There's an inherent way of kind of like Jason peppers that song with musical references. Like when he starts listing the names of all the girls, it's my favorite moment. We're playing like a Latin thing, and all of a sudden the klezmer violin comes in. So there are clues through there. I think most people, it's one of the things that I love about theater versus cinema is that you get a chance to kind of like educate people and awaken people's minds with whatever the author wants to and the producers and director want to give you. So hopefully people will recognize or learn or, whichever. But I think that people have really been responding so positively and, about just understanding where he's coming from. Whether they agree with it or not, that's a whole other thing, but they understand where he's coming from.
Absolutely. Are there other hands? Right in the middle.
I was wondering if it's different to play like on top of the stage or like below it.
That's an excellent question. The question was, is it different playing on top of the stage or, on it? And yes, very different. But God bless technology because I have a tiny little speaker and I can hear every breath that the actors take. Mm-hmm. So what I'm listening for is not so much the notes, I'm listening for their breath. And their breath informs me of where to land a downbeat. The toughest one is in Shmuel, when he comes downstage and he's being really intimate and he says, after the whole sun begins to rise and all that. So he goes, maybe it's time. What is it? Oh man, I can't even remember the lyrics. Yeah. When he does the Limovich section, which I love that. That's hilarious for me. Obviously, nobody else. When he says to go out onto a Limovich, the next line, Adam will take a breath in. He'll inhale in under the laugh, and I'll listen for that. And that's what makes me line that up. For them, on stage, that's why I'm in the box on what I call JTV. Which is like MTV, but cooler, because I'm on it all the time. And so they'll look for me for cues for certain things, like in Still Hurting, Katie will look, she'll be kind of looking here, but out of the corner of her eye, she'll see me raise my hand and kind of give her a cue.
Yeah, in a situation with a pit, he would be right in
there.
front. So if we had a little more space here, and the orchestra is actually in a pit,
Yeah.
you can look at him, nod his head or move. But that's why we have these handy monitors.
I
for
like
everybody.
it. I like it better there. I mean, I like it better here, to be honest. That I can. I mean, my whole thing is that I'm an accompanist. Like, I did a show with Bettina Miller at the Allen Room that was on PBS about a month ago, and that's my dream, is that because she's right in front of me. There's a 9-foot piano in Central Park. It's like that's the greatest thing that could possibly be.
There's such a strong relationship between you,
Yeah.
because you're just as much a part of the story
Very much.
as the words, like the relationship of the music. And certainly, from the rehearsal room, there's also once you add the orchestra, there's this really sort of rich storytelling that comes from it.
Absolutely.
And so the
I miss
relationship
it.
is strong.
Yeah, I miss it being here.
Yeah.
But knowing that if there was a big black piano in the middle of this, it doesn't really tell the story. You have to kind of like work with the director to figure out how to make it work. And believe me, that's a 6'1" piano up there. To get that up in the air was no small task.
Yeah.
And so much credit goes to the people that work here, the behind the scenes, the people that you don't see doing stuff. It's like just to get the engineering to make sure that platform is stable to hold, 6 people and an 800-pound piano. It's a lot. That's what the theater's about. It's about collaboration and making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, are there any final questions before we wrap up? It seems like a pretty wonderful way to end the conversation. It
Excellent.
is indeed all about collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.